Greetings and welcome back to another episode of the Daily Run, as today we're playing as Kane. This seems to be another special daily, which makes this a third one this month, and I believe that is the last one as well. We had two at the very start, and if you want to check them out, of course, you can probably find them in the playlist, but if you didn't, you're probably not missing out on too much, because these special daily challenges aren't, I would say, that special. Usually they involve just giving you an item or two. Sometimes they can be really fun, and they maybe add a whole new mechanic to the game, but in this particular case, we just start out with $1. So I was trying to think, what did change? Maybe we just got $1, maybe we won't get any coin drops, so we're kind of forced to spend our money on our shops and we have to use it wisely. Maybe it's something like a cautionary tale, but that didn't end up happening, so because the coins did drop and they did appear, so I was like, okay, myth busted. Maybe the second one is, maybe we have $1, but because Trolley Edmund is a bit trolly, maybe there aren't shops to spend the money on, but that myth was busted as well, because I did find a shop on the first floor. So what is there to the run? I don't think really there's anything to it. The only thing I did notice when I played, or at least I noticed after I stopped playing the daily, is that there were no restock machines in the shops, and that maybe is a consequence of the daily challenge. Maybe they're like, maybe just give us a daily that doesn't have any restock machines, but honestly I think that's just due to variance, because I don't think the restock machines are guaranteed to appear on the floor. They just have a chance of appearing in any particular shop, and in this particular one, just because of the seed, it did turn out to be so that they just didn't, and I think it was for the better, because looking back on the run, we basically all had 99 cents, which means that we could afford pretty much any item from the shop that we wanted, and there were no shenanigans by trying to reroll the items or the shop to try and get those breaking items that you would usually look for. So things like Mama Mega, Diplopia, Blank Card, Sackboy, etc, etc. So we were really all on the even playing ground, and I didn't find any apparent way of breaking the game. Maybe there is something, or maybe if you're going far enough, or maybe really explore everything that there is to explore, maybe you get a lucky Percho rune, and maybe you use that Percho rune on maybe a particular shop, you get the blank card, and I did find the Year rune, but it isn't apparent, and it isn't very obvious. And I do enjoy dailies like this, because I feel like whenever something is shoved down your throat, you pretty much have to take it, because if you don't take it, you know you're gonna be left at a disadvantage. But when you're just going through the daily and you're trying to get to boss rush, trying to get to Hush, and there are no apparent ways of breaking, and I don't find or see them, then I feel like that makes it for a much more engaging experience, because suddenly it's more like a war of attrition. You're just trying to get as many points as possible, you're trying to survive, you're trying to get to the end, and you're trying to beat every single objective just to try to get as many points as possible, and with no apparent signs of breaking, I feel that does make for a much more engaging daily experience. I do enjoy breaking runs, I do enjoy when they do appear, but I do wish they were just a bit more rare, just to make them a bit more special. It's nice when you're playing the game and you're just learning it, and the very first time you break the game and maybe you get a D6 with a bunch of battery charges and you just start re-rolling the shop or maybe an item room until you get something amazing like Tech X, and then you're really excited about that, and that feeling is very unique, especially when it happens for the first time, so when you're just kind of learning the ropes of the game. But when you get later into the dailies and you try to start playing the game competitively, you do notice that this game is actually pretty easy to break in a lot of cases, especially due to restock machines and reroll machines and things like that. It really made those things trivial, and I do feel like restock machines don't really have a place in dailies. Or maybe if they do, just make them break after one reroll, so it's still a decision, but it isn't really punishable. But even that, I feel like would be too much, just because of the variance. Because it's not always guaranteed that you're gonna find a bomb, it's not always guaranteed that you're gonna have enough money, and there's no way to go back, right? Maybe you have an item, you decide to take a risk, and you get something worse out of it. And that is probably the worst feeling that can happen in a daily. When you make a decision, you know it's the optimal decision, because why wouldn't you make the decision? So for example, I found Dark Bomb and Rotten Baby in the very first Devil deal, and I feel like that those are pretty good items, and in most cases, I would like to take them. But maybe there's someone out there who's like, I'm not gonna pick those items because I'm going for the maybe Angel deals, and maybe I hope I'm gonna get some good items out of that, and maybe they get Godhead on the second floor, or third floor, or whatever. And that just gives you kind of a weird feeling in your stomach, because you're trying to make a rational decision by picking up Dark Bomb and, of course, Rotten Baby, and both supremely good items and familiars, and then this guy is like, I'm not gonna take them, and then get something like Sacred Heart in the next floor. And that's something, obviously, that we can't control, but those feelings of variance, I feel like, should be reduced, and with restock machines existing in their current state, they're really not helping the cause. But, okay, so the run, going back to the run here, It was a strong run. Like I said, at 99 cents you really can't expect too much, even though the shops really weren't that good. Maybe, again, it was seeded, maybe it wasn't, maybe that's just the consequence of this daily, and maybe something's going behind the scenes, but I honestly think it's just variance. But the shops, besides no restock machines, also didn't really offer any particularly good items. I found Tarot Cloth, I think, and also found the Compass. Both okay items, but nothing too terribly good. Tarot Cloth can be especially useful with some cards, especially later on if you get a bunch of, maybe a sack that would give you more sacks, and then of course sacks give you cards, and when you start using those cards it can really kind of rack up your points. But in this particular case, because we didn't find anything else than other than Mystery Sack and later on the little chest, and they didn't really give me that many items. I'm not really sure what was up with that. The trinkets, and usually you do expect to get trinkets, pills, things like that from these items, but they just didn't come, and no particularly good cards. I was hoping to maybe get something like another Emperor card so I could teleport, or maybe just even the World, the Sun card, things like that, something you would expect to get usually when you're just playing throughout the daily, but nothing like that appeared, so it was very barren, or how could I put it? So we're just kind of hustling and trying to get from floor to floor just to get to Hush as fast as possible. We did get to Boss Rush. I decided to stick with the book of, not the Book of Shields, I'm not sure how it's called, the book that gives you shields, and because we did get 2020, I figured this was going to be the safe choice. There's a bug going on, especially in, not especially, but in Boss Rush, and that is whenever you finish a rush, a wave, you get 2 charges, but when the new wave starts, you actually get 2 more charges, so you get 4 charges every single time you beat a wave, and with an item like a Book of Shadows, that means that you can always keep it up. Usually it's pretty problematic, because you can usually take out 1 wave, but the second wave is just up to you to deal with, because you don't have a Book of Shadows, because it's an odd number, you need 3 charges, and you would only normally get 2, but because of this glitch, you actually get 4 charges, and you overfill it, and then you get basically a Book of Shadows charge every single wave. And I just remembered as I was talking about it what the name was, the Book of Shadows. That's pretty good. So the Book of Shadows, and because I had the Book of Shadows up constantly, I was able to get close and personal and just deal a lot of damage. I also picked up Firemind, and that might be a bad decision because it did hit me 2 times, I think, throughout the run, especially later on when I just walked into the room and there were enemies close by and it exploded and it damaged me. But that's not something you can really avoid. I figured I would be a bit more safe than usual just because I do have that Book of Shadows, and it's especially useful against killing a lot of bosses because now I also have Incubus, so I can get really close, start damaging the enemies, and when the tears explode, they leave a fire on the ground, and that fire kind of deals perpetual damage. It's also especially useful in Boss Rush because a lot of the bosses spawn on the same position, and if you can leave the fires on the ground, you can usually, or just most of the time, instantly kill them. So when they do spawn, they just end up taking a lot of fire damage and they just end up dying. So that was a pretty good proposition, and I think it was worth the pick. At least later on, it did prove to be quite nice, and especially because I also got Holy Mantle, I was able to be a bit more safe in that regard. Obviously, I didn't know I was gonna get Holy Mantle, but considering that I did get it, I really don't regret picking up Firemind in the first place. One thing I did forget to kind of take into account is Judas the Shadow. I did get it, I think I got it on the Hush Devil Deal. I found the Joker card, teleported to the Devil Deal, and I had Judas the Shadow, and I was like, I really want to trigger this because then I'm gonna have something like 18 damage, and with Incubus I'm really gonna start just outputting a lot of DPS, but I didn't find a reliable way to sacrifice myself. Maybe there was a curse room on the last floor, but I just mentally blocked it out, and I just kind of forgot that I had Judas the Shadow in the first place. So that is kind of like 50 points lost overall, which is not too terrible, but it does end up mattering on the end score just by a little bit, because I think I missed the 50,000 mark by only like 50 points, and I feel like if I didn't pick up Judas the Shadow and maybe another random item that I picked up, I would be able to get just over 50,000. Obviously, it wouldn't make a difference in ranking-wise, but it would make the numbers seem a lot more whole and a lot more round, and I think there's some respect for round numbers. I'm not really sure if it's just me, but I do think that people tend to respect or like round even numbers a little bit more just because they are just more visually stimulating in some regard. I'm not really sure why there is, but don't tell anyone because some people are really opposed to saying that some numbers are better than others because they're just numbers, they're not a concept. But okay, let's not get philosophical. So I did pick up Sinus Infection in the end because I felt like this is going to be a really good tool against Mega Satan. Mega Satan has a lot of HP, but with the amount of tears that we're producing, I felt like this is going to be a good way to just really deal a lot of DPS. And what's great about it is we can stick a lot of Sinus Tears, Booger Tears on him while we find other enemies. So even if you don't successfully kind of deal enough damage to him to recess him into this different state or whatever, the Tear will still be able to do damage over time, and of course we would be able to focus on other enemies. And just because of the enemies that he spawns, there really aren't enemies which would go invincible or maybe underground or whatever, so this really helps just to deal with all of that. But I did underestimate our damage just by a little bit, with Proptosis obviously, Sinus Tears and Death's Touch, and obviously Incubus and my own shots, and with the Book of Shadows I was really able to get in there and just deal with second phase in like 3 seconds flat, and obviously Sinus Infection helped on top of that just because it did give a lot of DPS. So with that said, we did finish the run, and you can see my score being not 50, but only 30 points shy of getting a higher, of 50,000. And I feel like that would be available if I didn't pick up Judas a Shadow in the first place, or at least I could have triggered it and maybe that would have helped, but whatever, it's not really that important. And we did finish in the 22nd place, which is obviously pretty good. Our damage penalty wasn't that high. I think I got hit something like 5 times in total, and I didn't get a lot of swag. I hope that maybe I would get a lot more swag in some regards, but I didn't. But I think the ultimate thing that did punish me here is just that I didn't explore. I'm not a fast player, which means that when I try to get around, try to get to boss rush and things like that, I end up skipping some of the rooms, and I feel like this really cost me here, because I saw people getting something like 18, maybe almost even 19,000 exploration bonus, and obviously that would have been quite a big help if I did get there, but the fact that I missed it, that does leave me in a bit behind. But still, 22nd place, not too terrible when you weed out the cheaters. I think I was in the 10th place, so top 10 is definitely a very solid score. So I hope it probably won't be until the end of the day, but at least it is now, and since it's like 6 hours into the daily, I do expect to be in the top 50 when the daily actually ends. So with that said, I hope you enjoyed this one, guys, and I hope to see you next time.